Welcome to episode 59 of Dial the Gate. My name is David Reed. Thank you so much for joining us. We have Robert Picardo joining us today, waiting in the wings here. I'm going to bring him in just a moment. Thanks so much for your patience. So the normal run of show for this will apply. I will go ahead and invite and ask you to submit questions in the YouTube feed at youtube.com/dialthegate. And then those will be added to the moderator queue. The moderators are fielding those questions for Bob right now, and then I will ask those in the second half of the show. He's got about 40 minutes with us today, and then we'll show you some of the merchandise that we have for Dial the Gate, some of these T-shirts that we've got available, and invite you to join into the community as well. Without further ado, I've got Mr. Robert Picardo, Richard Woolsey himself, and some may know you as this certain, being made of light. I don't know. You may have heard of it in Voyager.
There's a bit of a crossover in the various fandoms, I understand. Nice to see you again, David. We've known each other at least 15 years.
A long time now. Yeah, it goes way back. Mm-hmm. And I just want to thank you so much. You've always been there for me, sir. I've really appreciate every chance that you've given me to come on and celebrate the legacy of such a wonderful characters, not only Woolsey but the Doctor as well. So thank you for coming.
Thank you. Much appreciated. Thank you. I'm sorry that our communication got lost in subspace, and I apologize to your fans that I was a few minutes late through my own fault. I take it on me.
No, so what's going on there? I hear there was a possible mission with the Delta Flyers that might have just happened.
Exactly. I got a last-minute appeal from my two Voyager colleagues, Robert McNeil and Garrett Wong, who have a very successful podcast called The Delta Flyers, which I highly recommend. I've been on it before, but they asked me to drop in just for 5 minutes today, which turned into 25 minutes, of course. Because once I warm to my topic, which is me, I'm very much like the Doctor. And it was really just a discussion about how I came to sing opera on Voyager. That was the question. The episode they were doing is called The Swarm, which ostensibly was about the Doctor's memory beginning to deteriorate because his file, he was never meant to carry that much data in his matrix for other things other than medical information. So by expanding his program with other interests, he was actually, damaging it. But it's also the one where we established the Doctor as an amateur opera singer.
And you said that had not been the actual intent that for you to sing. It was more like listen to opera, right?
Exactly. The gag that I pitched to one of our co-creator producers, Jerry Taylor, was simply that when the rest of the plot of that week was happening, if they ever cut to the Doctor working alone in sickbay, that he was listening to this very passionate opera aria, thinking it was funny to juxtapose the Doctor's very placid, no affect face that he had the first couple of seasons against this enormously, expressive and emotional music. That was the suggestion, that I listened to opera in sickbay. However, after months of she said, well, we're doing some Klingon opera stuff on Deep Space Nine, but we'll keep it in the back of our minds. So I'd forgotten about it. Like 6, 7, 8 months later, we got a script. And in the beginning of Act 1, I'm singing opera. And I ran across the lot to her office and said, no. You misunderstood me. I wanted to listen to opera, not sing. And she said, well, can you sing? I said, well, I can sing, but I'm no opera singer. And she said, well, try it. If you're not good enough, we'll replace your voice. And that was the end of the discussion. It was like, well, we're doing it now. So get used to it. Even if I misunderstood you, now you're doing it.
You are, and you did 95% of that singing, except for a few select pieces.
You're absolutely right. And of the 5 episodes I sang in, I did all of my singing in 4 of them, and then the episode Virtuoso, where it was just too much and way too high. They had the real opera singer, Agostino Castagnola, who taught me the opera in all the other shows, taught me to sing it. He was the one who did the heavy lifting singing in Virtuoso. But yes, I ended up acquitting myself for an untrained singer, and certainly a non-opera singer. I did remarkably well. So it was but I was terrified the first time. Terrified.
Well,
when we pre-recorded that.
The Swarm is one of my favorite shows. So, it's terrific.
Well, thank you. Now, Now let's move on to the Gate. Let's change franchise.
Before
really
we
quickly.
do that, actually, I'd like to bring up what's behind you here. This suave, sophisticated person in the picture.
Oh, Suave Alphonso. Oh, Suave Alphonso. Do you know that it's funny that we just talked about the Swarm in this is me as a character that I do on my YouTube channel called Alphonso. He's the world's oldest gigolo and the world's most self-absorbed man. And he gives you romantic advice that is totally useless and that you should not listen to at all. It's just a send-up of if Hugh Hefner and the publisher of Hustler, Bob Guccione, had a love child, it would have been him.
Alphonso.
But per our recent conversation, this is the same hairpiece that, first of all, I wore this hairpiece in Gremlins 2 30 years ago. But it's the same hairpiece I wear as Rodolfo in O Suave Fanciulla on Voyager.
Oh.
So this hair has, every time I play an Italian character now, and all they did on Voyager, they just gave me these big, long sideburns. But
Right.
it is this wig. Mm-hmm.
Well, there you go. I've always loved Alphonso. It was absolutely outrageous. You know, sometimes you just got to go there.
Thank you. Well, I have 2 new characters now. I just debuted the telepathic composer who looks you in the eye and creates music in your head, whether you want it or not. And I have a new, I'm breaking the news on your show that I have a new female character coming up called Eva the Diva, who is a former opera singer herself. So I play multiple characters. I dress up and wear wigs and whatever. And it started out as just amusement during the pandemic to keep myself performing and give me something to do. And now it's just completely taken over my life because I get a kick out of doing it.
Well, that's the thing. You know, if you're enjoying yourself, then why the heck not? You know, we've all have to find an outlet somewhere. And before we do move too far away from Voyager, I was given this as a birthday gift a few years ago, and you may recognize it. This is actually this is a replica. My friend Jared gifted this to me for my birthday a few years ago. I had always wanted to know, did you get to keep one of your emitters?
No. No, they were very careful about the Star Trek props. They lifted them off our bodies, or took them away right away. I got some souvenirs from the set back in the day, most of which went to charity auction years and years ago.
I know you got your chair. I was there for that.
I got my chair. I also got, I did get my communicator from my last day's work, but that got lost in the shuffle. So I don't really have any. I know I don't have any souvenirs anymore I don't have, other than all of the licensed products that I have many of away in storage. I don't have anything that I walked off the set with anymore.
Do you still have your complete script collection? I know we were talking about that about 10 years ago.
Yes, I do. I do have every one of my Voyager scripts. I thought I would find a collector someday who loved the Doctor so much and loved the character that I would sell them the entire collection, because it appeals to me to keep them together. So they've been kept together. They're all just kept together with me right now.
I've given it serious thought. If I ever get rich in Bitcoin, I may hit you up again.
All right, we hear that for all of you people trying to get rich in Bitcoin. You can get the entire collection of my set used scripts, including the 2 that I directed from, because yes, I am dying to downsize and get rid of them. But I want them to stay together for some strange reason.
Absolutely. No, they're a set. What an arc you have had on Stargate, from a character that was written as, well, we have to add...
A douchebag. Douchebag.
Well, yes, that's not what I meant, though. A character...
Well, he was a complete douchebag. How about that?
I mean a character that was created because time was added to a terrific episode and they needed another plot to add. And then you come in and perform this hatchet performance of this guy who's absolutely going to just come in and cut the SGC asunder from all of its bull that he expects is going on here, because they've just lost their... It's funny, we lose Terrell and we bring in Picardo. It's seamless, from the same episode. And if you look back on the show, on the franchise as a whole, there is kind of a symmetry there, of going from one great character to another burgeoning great character arc.
You went from one Doctor character to one former Doctor character,
exactly.
Or an actor who once played a Doctor character. So that's an odd confluence as well. The character, as you said, was designed to be filler material. They wanted to turn the extra 8 or 10 minutes of Heroes into a two-parter, and they decided to turn it into their clip show, because they did about a clip show a season, where they mined all of the previous episodes for their best scenes and their best visual effects and whatnot. So I was brought in to do, I think, 12 pages of dialogue, difficult dialogue, in one day, that would tie all the pieces together of these clips and then make another episode.
Actually, that was at the end of season 7. So for Heroes Part 2, you're interrogating the members of SG-1 for what went wrong on the planet. And that was also done in one day of shooting. So for the clip show, the clip show came in later that season.
Oh, it did. So it didn't follow on the heels of Heroes Part 1?
No, the clip show came in later on in the season. It was called Inauguration. So, but for Heroes Part 2, you're in the interrogation room with members of the SGC.
Oh, that's right. So I ended up doing. So that was the second episode. Inauguration was the second episode.
Was your second episode? That's right.
I'm sorry, folks.
No, you're good.
Fails me slightly. I get it now. I had conflated those two. First of all, I never expected to come back. When I did Heroes Part 2, came in and met the whole SG-1 cast. Everybody across the board were so nice to me, but especially Don Davis, God rest him. And but the whole cast was so welcoming and so sweet, because it was a huge amount to do. It was a very complicated shot where I'm interrogating all of them and the camera's going around and around. And this is, that would be a much easier thing to do now with motion control photography. But to do it practically without any cuts, each of the cast members had to slip out of that chair quietly and slip back in when the camera was just at the right angle so you didn't see it. However, I'm supposed to be engaging someone sitting in that chair. And on the other side of the camera, as it's coming around, people are going like this, right, in and out of chairs. And I have to be very focused and look like I'm constantly talking to one person. It was really hard to do. And one little line muff or whatever would have ruined it. So we got through that whole day. I was flying to England the next day for a personal appearance that I was already contracted for. So I had to get it in one day. Andy Makita directed it. He was great. And it all just went seamlessly. And then Joe Malazzi and Paul Muley took me out to dinner that night, and they decided that they liked me. And they thought, I guess they must have thought, they didn't share this with me, but they thought, oh, what do? We painted ourselves in the corner by making this guy such a complete jerk. But we like this actor, and we'd like to have him back. So then every time they had me back, this completely unredeemable hatchet man douchebag that I had introduced in the first episode had this glimmer of a positive quality each returning time. So the way I have described it in the past is he's a complete douchebag, but then he comes back and it's like, oh, he's a douchebag who really believes in civilian oversight of secret military operations. So he has one little quality. This is one good thing about him. And then he was a complete douchebag who really believed in civilian oversight of secret military operations, who really didn't want to be a douchebag anymore. and then the next time he was a complete douchebag who didn't really want to be a douchebag anymore, but he didn't really know how to not be a douchebag anymore. Every time I had this glimmer of a positive quality, then I started having slight comic potential, right? When they did the crossover show, I think it was also called The Swarm. Interesting. We talked about Voyager's The Swarm.
Oh, yeah, with the R75.
Exactly.
The bugs, oh my gosh.
And that was the first time that Richard Woolsey had a little comic. He ran away from danger faster than anyone else. He was outrunning, outrunning people half his age to get away from danger. So he was a douchebag. He was a coward. Nobody liked him. He had no people skills. He had no leadership skills of his own. He simply could criticize yours. And then after a few years, I got a phone call from Joe Malazzi saying, we'd like you to be the new leader of the Atlantis expedition. And I said, well, wait a minute, Joe. I said, I'm very flattered, first of all. I love doing your show. I love working with you guys. But I'm an asshole. I'm a coward. Nobody likes me. Nobody would follow me. I run away from danger. I can't, I have no skills at all to be a leader. He said, don't worry, that's our problem. I said, great, I'll do it. So,
yeah. And you had just set up in the season 4 finale that Richard Woolsey had taken over Atlantis in the future, in the future that Shepard was told by a hologram McKay. He had actually gone in and taken it over, and there you are the next season. Well, we're going to make it happen.
I hadn't even thought of that as well. The problem with a show that you don't often deeply grasp what your character is doing as much as the regular fans do is that sometimes it's news to you when people pull stuff out. Because I didn't even realize that. I do know that I had more fun. People say, what do I can't compare my Star Trek experience to Stargate. It's not fair because Star Trek went on for so many years. I got to do so many cool things with that character and to grow so much. But I can say that just the experience of working on Stargate was so much easier and freer in a way. Star Trek, they protect the franchise very carefully because it's all set in this imaginary future. They're really careful about anything, they don't let you change a comma without permission because they really don't want anything that smacks of the present day in this 300 year in the future
Roddenberry's
reality.
Vision.
And I understand and I respect that, which is why they have kind of mid-Atlantic speech for most of the actors, and they don't use contemporary references from the 20th century or now 21st century would mean nothing in the 24th century. So they're careful with the dialogue. Because Stargate is a science fiction show that was set in this sort of secret present, they can make contemporary references. In any case, it had a much looser feeling. The producers welcomed me ad-libbing. If I said, can I try something different in the next take? They went, oh, go ahead. Whereas on Voyager, that would have been a phone call 3 days before we shot it,
right,
in order to get permission to do an alternate line. So all I'm saying is that it was just a very liberating kind of a feeling on that set versus my previous experience, as much as I loved my previous experience. And also Joe and Paul were just great producers, as Brad Wright, Robert Cooper. They were all so positive toward me. They just treated me like gold. I've never been taken out to more, incredible dinners than I have by Joe Malazzi. I recommend any actor work with him. Yeah, you get more. There are more perks to working with Joe Malazzi than any other producer ever, for which I'm very grateful. He's been a great friend to me over the years.
Well, you had really earned your stripes. The fact of the matter is, I remember you telling me, in a Message in a Bottle, one of my favorite episodes, you had to fight for the line, after Andy Dick says, my breathing is merely a simulation. You say, so is my neck. Stop it anyway. Stop breathing down my neck.
Anyway.
You would really push that hard. And by the time that Atlantis had come around, by the time that Richard Woolsey's character had come around, they were able to see this guy can do it. Just give him a shot, absolutely. And I will say one thing for Richard Woolsey. As far as we could tell, despite all of his issues, he was not corrupt. And he was a man of principle. And if he didn't have that at the beginning, it wouldn't have worked.
That's an excellent observation because that is true. He was there, even though he was ruthless.
Yes. In
his style, he was there to find the truth. Now, it is suggested that someone's head had to roll. So if you turn around what you just said, if no one was in fact responsible for this tragedy, he still was going to find someone who was as responsible as possible.
That's quite possible.
So that's not corruption, but that's like closure for him.
Right.
I need to assign blame to one of you people, and by God, I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
Or all of you. But you're right. Well, that's sort of what I meant when I said he really believed in oversight, civilian oversight of the military. That is a positive thing. Nobody wants, especially with, look at Myanmar, right? I mean, nobody wants a military coup taking over a democracy. So he believes that the military has to have civilian oversight in all of, especially in a secret and dangerous program, potentially dangerous program for the entire planet. But if I have a particular skill as an actor or a stock in trade, as you would, I have, it's playing characters that you initially don't like, but you grow to like in spite of their bad impressions, so to speak. And it goes even to my character, the gym coach on the Wonder Years, Mr. Cutlet, who was a very, except for the fact that he had 70 IQ points less than Richard Woolsey, he was also an officious, by the books kind of a character. And even the Doctor, when he's first introduced, because he was a new technology and he had these special, algorithms that were supposed to interface with patients so he could develop and learn a bedside manner. It didn't quite work at first. So all of these characters, they're not empathetic, and they're not really likable at first. But I think the key is always to give the audience glimpses of what's underneath, why they are the way they are, and then the audience starts to root for them to loosen up and to be redeemed, so to speak. And that's what they did with Woolsey eventually. You don't see that in the first episode, but you start to see him wishing he had better people skills and wishing he had some community or friends with somebody. And what they did so brilliantly, really in the first episode of season 5 on Atlantis, when they made Woolsey the commander, was they had 3 little vignette scenes that really made the audience root for him. The first one was when he couldn't get out of the briefing room at the end. He literally couldn't get the doors to open. That was just so funny and so kind of pathetic.
It's like the city. It's like the city didn't even want him there.
Exactly. And there was when they give him his when Taylor gives him her baby to hold, and he literally has no idea what to do with the baby. And then when he complains that he lost his dog and is divorced to his wife, I mean, there were little things that showed that he'd, oh my God, this guy has, it isn't all easy for this guy, or he's trying to make an adjustment. I think that the audience began to start to root for him. And the other great thing about playing that character is here I was an actor in my middle 50s. At a time when I took that job, it was just after the huge financial downturn in 2007. And a lot of people that had retired had to go back into the workplace because they'd lost their retirement money or whatever. So you saw a lot of people in their 50s and into their 60s going back into the workforce, trying to redefine themselves. So that was the other thing that was cool about playing that character, someone in their middle 50s going from being, doing one job. Hey, I'm brought in to evaluate your leadership. Whoops, now suddenly I have, the tables have turned and I have to become a leader myself. Someone trying to redefine themselves and in a brand new work situation was something I think that was really it was in the ether at that time, because of the big financial downturn.
And those of us who have worked in offices have that feeling of what it's like. Tamlin Tamita as Shen, she comes in and she's taken his job now, and he's sitting where Weir and Carter were sitting before. And so, the tables have literally turned. And we're talking about a fairly eccentric person here as well. This is a guy who brings his boardroom table to another galaxy because he's more comfortable with it. When he's dressing
and now
down,
she's working on Star Trek. And now she's to make it full circle.
Absolutely, as a Romulan. That's right.
And she's a terrific actress and a lovely person. Loved working with her.
Absolutely. And we're talking about a guy here, when he wants to unwind, he puts on his business suit. So
that was another suggestion of mine.
That's terrific.
Joe was so open. I said, wouldn't it be funny if someone at the end of a long day working in a jumpsuit, in ostensibly a comfortable outfit, but then goes home to relax and puts on a suit and tie
for himself.
Simply because that was the uniform of his prior life. It was so, I thought it was a sweet idea. And Joe was like, he was so open. He was like, great idea, we'll do it. And that was, I really do. I remember that moment. I like that. It showed that he was just, cutting his teeth in his new job, but he still missed the sort of the comfort of his former identity, the guy he used to be.
I think that's just one of the things that worked about Stargate so well it's particularly with David Hewlett's character, McKay. He also came in as an antagonist. And through the end of that show, in many respects, he still was a closeted antagonist. His edge never went away, but he adapted to situations and grew as a character. And as an actor, I'm sure you can't appreciate anything more.
No, and I agree with you. And David also, he did never lose his edge. He had the most wonderful way of kind of whining, both in character and out of character. And he had this amazing ability to crack me up. I don't usually work with other actors that can really break me up constantly between takes, or even on camera, rarely. That's not something that's easy to do with me. He was really good at it.
Did you find him a kindred spirit in terms of all the technobabble that you had to ingest and then back out, over the years?
He was great at it. And he was very, he could speak as quickly as I spoke on Voyager. I think by the time I got to start, well, first of all, it was a different character. I didn't have to speak that quickly. But I was in awe of how he could chew the words out. Yeah.
Yeah, that's quite an experience. I mean, to be able to care with, Cutlip, is another fine example, but with the Doctor and with Woolsey, what a satisfying, experience those to look back on and say, you know what, I was given a fair bit to chew on there, and it came out pretty good. So.
No, I'm happy. It's great to be just even on one television show that sort of stands the test of time. But I feel lucky to have been on 3 of them. The people in different ways, because the Wonder Years is always on somewhere,
always,
on, platform. And same thing, of course, with Star Trek and Stargate as well. Although I wish even more Stargate, but people, constantly revisit the work if they get to know a new version of the show, as they certainly have with Star Trek. And next season, I don't think it's a surprise, they're planning an all African-American version reboot of the Wonder Years. So that will send people back to the original one as well, if they love that show. And of course, with Stargate, there are constant rumors of a new Stargate in some form, which I'm sure there will be sometime, because it's
at some point
it's studio gold for MGM television. So at some point they will want to mine it again. So it'll be, and then at that point, the fans of watching the new show or the new movies or whatever will go back and revisit, the other one. So it all helps the respective brand names and keeps the, and that's what a successful franchise is. Fans want more of it, and until they get more of it, they keep watching the old stuff and hoping for more new stuff.
Absolutely. Before I bring in fan questions, how are things with the Planetary Society?
Thank you for asking. I should have my pin on. I do in most interviews, my little planetary pin. We recently had a very successful online Planet Fest to celebrate the Perseverance rover landing. Big success. We announced that we have an anonymous donor who's now no longer anonymous, who has made a huge pledge to us. So we have that's part of a big new fund drive that will ensure our future for years to come, the Planetary Society. For those of you who don't know, it's a nonprofit space advocacy group presently run by Bill Nye the Science Guy, originally co-founded by Carl Sagan 40 years ago, or now 41 years ago. And I encourage your listeners to go to www.planetary.org and check it out. If you are a space fan, then you must be a Planetary Society member by definition.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. I've got some fan questions for you here. Jeremy Heiner wants to know, Bob, how do you think the Doctor would have responded to Woolsey and vice versa? Do you think they would have gotten along or been mortal enemies?
I think they would have thought the other was an asshole. So that's a funny question. I've never really thought of it that way, but it would be a delightful challenge to have tried to play a scene between the two of them. I suspect that the Doctor would have found the old Woolsey what's the word? A functionary, an unctuous toady of sorts. But the more enlightened Woolsey facing the more enlightened Doctor would have been interesting, because I suspect that early on in the encounter, perhaps their worst qualities would come out with each other, because they would see, in some level, they might see a little bit of their former selves in each other to an extent. So, but maybe they would have reached an agreement by then, simply because they both grew so much as characters. I mean, arguably, Woolsey grew not quite as much as the Doctor, but grew a great deal, considering it happened in a very compressed time. He really had quite an arc.
He really did, and I mean, it was one of those where with the Doctor, it was like, okay, hopefully we'll have 7 years on television. We're going to go through with this, and we're going to make a meal out of this character and the situations that he's in. And then with Woolsey, it kind of wasn't necessarily planned that way. But when you have the right creative team that goes out and creates an honest portrayal with the actor, an honest portrayal of a character, as long as those pieces are in place, there's no reason it can't grow into anything.
And really great writers in television write to the strengths of the actor they have cast. So even if they had an initial vision and the actor presents that, then they start and I think what happened when Joe Malazzi and Paul Muley took me out to dinner that night, they saw, first of all, they talked about my work on Voyager and all that, right. But they saw something in me, some colors that they went, oh, I'd like to see some of those colors show up in this character we've created. I think it's possible to use little bits of that, whatever. In other words, they saw something in me, or maybe it was simply that they liked me enough that they wanted to have me around again. But they had the idea of how to, redeem the character. And in perhaps the thing, I knew that Voyager was going to be a good job longevity-wise when I took it, but I didn't see. When I took that job, I had no idea that I was in for the ride of my life, that the character was going to develop like that. I didn't understand.
Well, Life
Star
Signs.
Trek well enough.
Just watch Life Signs, and that's where it all happens. So.
But I didn't, at the beginning, I didn't understand that I had gotten the great role of the show. I assumed that I didn't know enough about Star Trek, that the artificial intelligence character was going to be, potentially was a breakout character. I thought, well, Spock was a Vulcan. We have a Vulcan character. Actually, Spock was half Vulcan. We had a full Vulcan character. And as wonderful an actor as Tim Russ was, that sort of constrained his character development more. He either had to play the Vulcan all the time, or have the 3 or 4 episodes over the 7 years where it's like, Tuvok goes crazy.
Yeah,
for
something
whatever
happens
reason.
to him. But you're the lens through which stories of humanity can be told, because you're a mirror holding the mirror up to the audience, to us.
Mm-hmm. And I didn't get that until about halfway into the first season, that I have a much better role than I thought I did. And really, when the producer put his arm around me, after shooting 5 episodes, and said, you are going to be the most popular character on the show. And I looked at him like he was crazy. I was flattered, but I totally didn't believe it. And I thought, I don't get it. I don't see it. But he already got it. He already saw the potential there, or knew from creating it that I didn't. So the funny thing about it is that if I had known the character was going to be that great, it would have just, psyched me out for my audition, and I probably wouldn't have done as well. And also with respect to Atlantis, that was just a one-shot guest star that they just handed me. I had no expectation of it going anywhere. So I guess the kind of lesson as an actor is like, it's better not to know up front that this is going to be a great role, because you'll simply you won't psych yourself out of doing your best work at the audition. You'll simply treat it like anything else. And then once you have it, it grows, it just exceeds your expectations by far.
It's a fair point. Carlos, was there a storyline or an angle of Woolsey that you wish you had gotten a chance to explore?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were asking Carlos a question. How stupid am I? You are relating. You are.
Right.
I was
Carlos
waiting for
wants
Carlos.
to know.
I was waiting for Carlos's answer to that very interesting question. I was secretly shown the TV movie that we understood we were going to get to make after Atlantis that never happened, and I'm not going to say. But first of all, I only read it once. I don't remember, but it was really great, and I was very hopeful that we would get to go beyond where the end of the 5th episode, sitting in San Francisco Bay. I was really hoping that we would go farther. As far as specific things, I don't know. I mean, he really becomes a leader in the finale. I mean, you see him as kind of a fully formed leader. So of course I would love to have taken that to the next level rather than have to, because I spent the whole season kind of brick by brick getting built into that leader. It would have been nice to see the kind of leader he became on an ongoing basis, having had the past that he had, being the age I was. He's never going to be the rough and ready guy because he's a guy in his late 50s at that time. So it would have been fun to get, once he really clicked as a leader, to have, done anything else, to have done any other stories would have been fun. I can't give you a specific story I would love to have done, simply to just continue having really mastered the leadership skills, which I only did, in that last episode.
Absolutely. Let me see here. Scotty 0709. If you were asked, would you say yes to appearing on Star Trek Picard?
We get asked this question an awful lot. I really enjoyed the first season of Star Trek Picard. It's wonderful to see Patrick doing that character again. I loved all of certainly Jerry Ryan and 7 of 9, and Jonathan Del Arco, and of course seeing Frakes and Marina Sirtis and Brent Spiner, to see all of these actors that I adore as people, first of all, and colleagues, but to see them again bring their characters back to life with so much history that added weight to their performances was just great. It was great fun. So of course it would be fun to revisit the character. The Doctor, of course, theoretically should not age in the same way that Data shouldn't age, so there would be a certain amount of digital correction. But of course, I also played the character's programmer, who would age in real time. So I think I'm having watched how exciting it was to see those guys get to revisit their iconic characters, makes you, of course, think about, yeah, that would be fun. And I also, I every time I hear about the possibility of something happening in the Stargate world again, it would be fun to revisit that character as well. It always is. You want to get away from it for a while. You want to put a few years behind you and do other things, because it doesn't make sense to revisit something. But when the audience has a passion for not only a particular saga of entertainment, a science fiction franchise, if you will, but just a character. They love seeing an actor. I mean, everybody loves to see Kelsey Grammer in Frasier, and if he plays Frasier again, who's not going to want to see that?
No,
so
that's absolutely true.
I get it. That it's funny when they were talking about a reboot of the Wonder Years. It'll never happen now because the reboot is an African American family, which I think is a great idea. But there was some talk. I had little feelers put out about, hey, if it were to come back. And I started thinking, what would Mr. Cutlip be doing now? And I decided that it would be great because Mr. Cutlip was an unmarried man. If Mr. Cutlip had come out and now had it was in a gay marriage, had a partner,
it's not impossible,
and owned like a like a little restaurant or a pizza parlor where all the kids of the present generation hung out. So Mr. Cutlip had gone from being a very carefully guarded and hidden closeted homosexual in the late 60s, and was now, a sort of freewheeling, life is a very happy man because he was so profoundly unhappy back then. That's what I thought would have been a great move for that character.
I loved the Wonder Years growing up, and that character was always terrific. So there are certain hallmarks of television, and you were very lucky to be in 3 of them. So
yeah, I agree. I feel blessed.
Last question, or rather a comment, really. Kyle says, my girlfriend is actually sick right now and can't watch live. Could you give her a short doctor shout out to Cleo? She loved meeting you in 2015 in Vegas.
Yes. All right. Cleo, it's your doctor, and thank you for showing up today in sickbay for your annual physical. I understand you're not feeling very well. Here, let me scan you. Oh, I see. Yes, Cleo. Yes, I completely understand. Well, here is my prescription for you. I want you to binge watch all of your favorite Doctor episodes of Voyager, back to back. There should be at least 15. And at the end of those 15 hours, or actually 15 times 43 minutes, you will feel better. I promise. How about that?
Bob, wonderful as always, sir. I would love to have you back on at some point here in the future. Sure. It's always a pleasure to catch up with you. Continued great success. I know you were working on a lot of pages of script last week, and I'm glad we were able to make it work this week, sir.
Thank you. I want to talk about, thank you for that. I'm doing the show that I love being cast on. It's on the Black Entertainment Network Plus platform called The Family Business with Ernie Hudson of Ghostbusters fame. And I'm having a ball playing an elderly jeweler who runs a drug dealing family. It's such a strange role for me, Bernie, but I love doing this, and I highly recommend, if you're a fan of mine and you want to see something completely different, then this is as if the rabbi in Hail Caesar that I played became a drug dealer. God. So I'm having a ball doing that. And I also wish you would remind your fans about my YouTube channel. If you can't find the link, or if you guys don't put it up on the screen, then you can go to my Instagram, Robert_Picardo, and the link is in my bio. So okay. I'm working like crazy with all these new characters. So if you like my work, I promise I will make you smile.
That's great. Are Buddy and Lola, they doing okay?
Too old, I'm sorry, right now. Yeah, no, we lost one, but Lola's too great. Well, we'll talk about it privately. It's
Absolutely.
A sad story.
All right.
Age catches up with all chihuahuas.
Yeah, I hear that. Absolutely. My doggy played with Bob's doggies back in the day. So my favorite memories. So it's a pleasure, my friend. You take care of yourself, okay? Be well.
Thank you, David. You too. All right.
Bye-bye, Bob.
Cheers to everyone.
Thank you. Robert Picardo, everybody. Richard Woolsey on Stargate SG-1, Atlantis, and Universe. It's so exciting to get to meet your heroes. And I grew up watching Wonder Years and Voyager, and so it was always spectacular to have him on. So, and to be able to know him and share memories with him now. So thank you so much to everyone for tuning in. Appreciate your patience. I know it was a little bit late, and we'll have him back for more shows here in the future. We have Stargate swag. Well, Stargate themed swag, I should say. Dial the Gate is brought to you every week for free, and we do appreciate you watching. But if you want to support the show further, buy yourself some of our themed swag. We're now offering t-shirts, tank tops, sweatshirts, and hoodies for all ages and a variety of sizes and colors at Redbubble. We currently offer 4 themed designs and hope to add more in the future. The word clouds designs have both a solid background or transparent background option, so you can have some flexibility between choosing a light or dark color. Do keep that in mind when you are making your selection. Checkout is fast and easy, and you can even use your Amazon or PayPal account. Just visit dialthegate.redbubble.com, and thanks for your support. And Dial the Gate is partnered with 3dtech.pro for the month of December to give you a chance to get your very own Atlantis, Puddle Jumper, and BC-303. To enter to win these items, you need to use a desktop or laptop computer and visit dialthegate.com. Scroll down to Submit Trivia Questions. Your trivia may be used in a future episode of Dial the Gate, either for our monthly trivia night or for a special guest to ask me in a round of trivia. There are 3 slots for trivia, 1 easy, 1 medium, and 1 hard. Only 1 needs to be filled in, but you're more than welcome to submit up to 3. Please note, submission form does not currently work for mobile devices. The trivia must be in before April the 1st. If you're the lucky winner, I'll be notifying you via your email to get your address. And be sure to check out our partner's website for more Stargate-related merchandise at 3dtech.pro. And if you like what you've seen in this episode, I would appreciate it if you'd click the like button. It really makes a difference with YouTube's algorithm and will definitely help the show grow its audience. Please also consider sharing this video with a Stargate friend. And if you want to get notified about future episodes, click the subscribe icon. If you plan to watch live, I recommend giving the bell icon a click so you'll be the first to know of any schedule changes, which will probably happen all the time. And bear in mind, clips from this live stream will be released over the course of the next several days on the gateworld.net YouTube channel. Thanks to my production assistants, Linda Gategabber Fury and Jennifer Kirby, Summer, Keith, Tracy, Jeremy, Reese, Anthony, my moderating team. You guys make this show possible. I wouldn't be able to do it without you, as well as our viewers. Thank you so much for tuning in. We do the show for you. Hope you're enjoying it. Click the like button if you do. It does make a difference. We'll be seeing you tomorrow with Saul Rubinek and Vaitiari Hirschan, Emmett Bregman, and Share/Amanet from Stargate SG-1. They'll be heading your way live tomorrow. Tune in to ask them questions at youtube.com/dialthegate. My name is David Reed for Dial the Gate. See you on the other side.